Hello and welcome to the first in a series of character analyses that I'm going to have for the game Xenogears. Fei Fong Wong is the main character and protagonist of Xenogears. At the start of the game, Fei is a fairly typical 18-year-old protagonist. He is an affectionate but somewhat timid character living in a remote village. This remote setting for the beginning of the game essentially removed Fei from understanding the quarrels and struggles of the civilizations that exist around him, and keeping him in a peaceful state. On top of that, Fei also suffers from a rather severe case of amnesia, to the point that he doesn't remember anything that happened to him before the age of 15. This is probably for the best, because just under the surface of his own persona existed the alternate personality and a much more violent personality known as id. These two character personalities are polar opposites of each other. While Fei is loving and a bit of a pacifist, id is a hateful and psychotically violent individual. As it turns out, neither are the truly dominant personality in their body. Another persona, known as the coward, exists within them. The coward became a recluse in his own mind following the death of his mother, allowing id to take over. Using the powers of the wave existence, id spent the next several years wreaking havoc on the world around him, until 3 years before the start of the game, when his father sealed id inside of an artificial persona known as Fei, this being the Fei we play as during the bulk of the game. Fei's personality changes dramatically during the game, completing a rather large character arc. In the beginning, he was an affectionate but somewhat timid young man I mentioned earlier, but following the destruction of his hometown at the hands of id, Gebler, and Kislev, his demeanor changed. He became depressed and suicidal. For a short time he blamed himself, then blamed Gebler and Kislev, whom had started the battle in his hometown. After traveling with Ellie for a time, his suicidal thoughts subsided, leaving behind a desire to rebuild his hometown. During this time, he took on some rather extreme pacifist tendencies. Fei wished to avoid all things related to fighting, desiring to leave Weltal, his gear, in the woods, rather than repair it. It was only at Saiten's urging that he move it further from Lahan that he agreed that it should be repaired. Later, during the Gebler invasion of Bart's base, his pacifist ways resurface. If out of either fear or regret, Fei refused to even fight back when they were attacked. It was only at the sight of nearly watching two children killed by one of the Gebler invaders did he finally take up his gear in the battle. It was some time later, during the invasion of Kislev by Gebler, that Fei finally realized that he couldn't just sit back and allow his power to go to waste while people were suffering. At that point, he pretty much abandoned his pacifist ways for a much more practical and serious approach to the problems of the world. It wasn't until Fei began to receive memories from his lives before his memory loss and the memories of his past lives that he completely lost his childish tendencies. Eventually, when he confronted his id and coward personas, he was the most level-headed and mature of the three. He had at that point come a long way from the angry and frightened individual we had met in the beginning of the game. During the course of the game, Fei forms friendships with several other characters. Saiten, who is a bit of a mentor to Fei, and Bart, who is like a brother to Fei. But the closest person to Fei would be Ellie, whom Fei had met soon after the destruction of Lahan. While the two of them are obviously in love with each other, neither one will openly admit it. Each of them has their own neuroses to blame. With Fei, it's possible that the death of Alice, whom he had fallen in love with shortly before her death at Id's hands, was still fresh in his memory. What is unknown to the two of them, until most of the way through the story, is that the two are only the latest in a line of reincarnations. For the past 10,000 years, each of their iterations have ended up together, but eventually split apart by the death of Ellie. The nature of this power to reincarnate will be discussed in later episodes, but understand that Ellie's existence is directly tied to Fei's. In terms of power, gameplay-wise, he was nothing too special. However, in terms of the storyline, he is much greater. He has the power of the wave existence, the power of a god. No one, not Graf, nor Mayang, nor Ellie, were his equal. His id persona, in particular, gave the best demonstrations of his power. Id destroyed gears with his bare hands, and was so feared that Fei was frozen at the mere threat of that power being unleashed. During the game, I felt sorry for Fei numerous times. He had to endure the death of his loved ones and being thrown into a battle much greater than himself. Despite his despair, there wasn't anywhere he could turn.
You're a coward!
That's right. I'm a coward.
On the other hand, I was often angry with Fei. He allowed his own fear to control him, but such is the making of a deep character. I hope you have enjoyed this short character analysis. In the future, I hope to have several more for the more significant characters and major plot points.